for joining Paranormal Pour. I'm Nia.
I'm Nani.
And today we're going to tell some spooky stories.
Wow.
Sipping some spirits. And today we're going to start with our very first scariest story. So we are starting with a classic Havana Club 7. If you're not familiar with this rum, it is probably a staple in my household. But it is an incredible rum. It's aged for 7 years. You unfortunately cannot find this in the U.S., so sorry for all of those that are here in the U.S. trying to buy this. But if you do go overseas, you can typically get them in duty free, and they're really accessible. I think I paid for this very large bottle $30, and it's so worth it. We're also sipping on some coffee. Because believe it or not, it's quite early right now.
Yes. Join us. Sips.
Okay, I'm going to serve some of this.
Perfect.
And then I'm going to talk about my very first
Paranormal
encounter.
And while she does that, I'm just going to remind you guys, we'd love to hear your stories. You can either call in at 305-814-7687, or you can email us at paranormal4stories@gmail.com, and we can share your stories.
All right. Or if you're up for the challenge, email us and we can go on a live Zoom and literally talk about it in person. Cheers.
That actually blends so well with coffee.
I figured it would.
Oh, that's so good with coffee, you guys. She's just drinking regular coffee. I have mine with froth milk and sugar. It's really good.
So, my very first encounter with the paranormal. So, once upon a spooky story, I was 5 years old, and I'm from Ecuador, and my great-grandfather had just passed. And we were all together in his old house, which is in downtown Quito, which is the capital of Ecuador. All downtown Quito has cobblestone streets because it is literally from colonial times. So there's a lot of legends and spooky stories within my city by itself. But their house was located in downtown, and everybody was gathered, of course, because he had just passed. But we were kind of like, it wasn't like a sad situation. Everybody was really happy because he was quite old.
Yeah, I mean, your great-grandfather, he had to have lived a very long life.
Yeah, and he was a very hard worker. He was a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So he actually lived quite a long life. I think he lived till he was like 80 something. Anyway, I was there was just a few kids, but I didn't really see that side of my mom's family because we had been traveling here to the States back and forth so much that I wasn't very familiar with my cousins or her family. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, and at the time I was by myself. So when I got there, I obviously was already bored, and then my great aunt tells me, if you want to go watch TV in his room, you can. Mm-hmm. But she warned me that because he had just passed, he's retracing his steps. Mm-hmm. And people had heard him walk at night, turn on the TV.
I already have goosebumps and we're just getting started.
She's like, he used to love watching TV in that room, so he turns on the TV, just don't be scared.
Mm-hmm. And he's just coming in to say hi.
He's just coming in to basically retrace, is what they call it in Ecuador. I don't know if any other country does this, but they say that the dead retrace their steps.
That's actually really common in Jewish culture as well. They say
really?
When a soul passes, or when a human physical body passes, the soul has about 7 days to kind of finish their unfinished business, or however the term is from wherever you're from, and they kind of come back and they revisit their loved ones, kind of their way of saying goodbye almost. Yeah. And then they say goodbye to their body and things like that. So that's funny that that's common in Ecuador
Yeah, everybody says that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm about, I think like 5 or 6, and then I go into his room. I walk. By the way, these houses in downtown Quito are extremely old.
Mm-hmm.
Like wooden floors that creak and crack. The cement there is very, very thick, so when you hear noises, the floor is common, but the walls is not. Eventually,
Yeah.
I'll tell more stories, but that's why I'm bringing this up.
Mm-hmm.
Because knocks on the
Yeah, you shouldn't be able to hear knocks
Yeah.
if it's
Yeah.
thick concrete walls.
Yeah, they're very, very thick concrete walls because it's from like colonial times. Anyway,
And I mean, it's also mountainside too, right?
yeah, exactly.
So it needs to be nice and sturdy.
So earthquakes too.
Yeah.
So I go into his room, I lay down,
Mm-hmm.
turn on the TV.
Oh, he didn't do it for you.
No.
I thought that's where that was going when she mentioned he might
But
turn
wait.
the TV on. There's more.
But wait, there's more. So I lay down. Everybody, I think, had gone into like, it was a two-story house,
Mm-hmm.
and like the bedrooms were upstairs, but the kitchen was downstairs. So as far as I remember, nobody was on my same level. And the
Mhm.
first thing I started to hear once I lay down on the bed and turned on the TV was footsteps in the hallway
Okay.
that start like approaching the room that I'm in.
Ooh, literally. You guys
And-
can't see it, but it's goose pimples.
And I'm
all
like
over.
thinking to myself, okay, it's my mom coming to check
Right.
on me.
Yeah, you immediately just assume it's a person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I kept on hearing them closer, closer. And of course, my heart is like beating faster. And I'm trying to remember that it's nothing bad. It's nothing like, it's just my great grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
And then the steps get closer, and then I see on the bed that I'm laying on an indent. Like somebody had sat on the edge of the bed. I'm not even lying. I was so scared, so petrified that I couldn't even move, and the TV
Oh my
was
gosh.
on. The other crazy part is I'm laying petrified there because I literally didn't want to move. I was so scared.
Yeah.
Then the channel changed, like two little, and it was like a very old TV, like
the
the
tube TVs where
like,
you had to manually.
yeah. So it turns twice, and then the indentation goes from like somebody sitting on the bed to
Mhm.
somebody laying down, and then when
Oh
that,
my god, full body chills
Yes.
today, y'all.
and then I just stayed there for a little bit, and I got up when I eventually like stopped being so petrified. I got up, and I went out the room really slow, and I left.
It's like, okay, you can have your space. Sorry to intrude.
Yeah, so that was my first encounter with the paranormal. Luckily, I had been warned, so I honestly didn't think of it at the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I think I would have screamed, or it would have been a worse experience if I didn't know that it was supposed to be my great
Right.
grandfather.
Yeah, I think, and that was wise that your aunt, told you about it in advance.
Yeah, the crazy story, by the way, about this house, which is, I wouldn't say it's creepy, but I went there a couple of times because my great aunt, well, two of his sisters, or no, two of my mom's my great aunts kept the house.
Okay.
And there was a lot of follow-up stories with the house, including one of my great aunt's son. She had told me a couple of stories with the house. I don't know what happened, but of course, eventually my great grandfather, like, I'm assuming he left.
Mm-hmm.
But the weird thing is that they ended up splitting and renting half of the house or something like that, because it was huge. It was a huge house. And the neighbors downstairs ended up telling my great aunts when they went on vacation, they're like, oh, I thought you guys were going on vacation. And they're like, oh yeah, we went. We were gone for like a week. And they're like, oh no, there was like
Movement, noises.
apartment movement, noises, like all kinds of stuff, music turning on and off, like all kinds of crazy stuff like that. And my second cousin, I believe he is, one of these Christmases that we were gathered at my grandma's farm, he had told me that basically he was in the house one day and he experienced poltergeist stuff in the kitchen, like
why
glasses.
are they always messing with the kitchen? Have you ever noticed that?
I don't know. I guess because they have more stuff.
It's like opening cabinets, it's pulling open drawers, it's throwing cups around. It's almost always in the... But yeah, I think it's because there's just more stuff to play with in there.
Yeah, and noticeable stuff because people are constantly in the kitchen.
Right. It's something you would notice if it was moved. But
the weird thing is, like, he had been going through some, like, really hard times, so everybody kept on dismissing what he was saying because he had been drinking a lot, basically. So...
Probably because of all the stuff that was happening.
Maybe, or I don't know. He was going through, like, a really hard time.
Yeah.
But the thing is, he said that he would stay up pretty late at night, and when he would sit near the kitchen, glasses would move. Like, he'd be drinking and glasses would move. Or
the ghost is just like, no, sir.
No more
done. You're cut off.
Yeah, basically. But yeah, so that is my spooky story. I didn't have any more experiences when I've gone back, but I do remember hearing a lot of follow-up stories when I would meet my great aunt. And the funny story is that my mom's side of the family is very Catholic. But my great-grandmother, she used to be a curandera, which is kind of like...
Based off of just what it sounds like, word-wise, with my Portuguese, it sounds like something that would be like a healer or something. Okay.
She used to be a healer, and when we would go to her house, but I'll tell more stories about that, because that's pretty cool when I tell non-spooky stories, maybe.
Yeah.
But they also had that... They did a lot of like, if you felt bad, they'd give you like a tea with some herbs, or they would cleanse you with an egg. So we did have, even though they were very Catholic and spiritual in that sense, they also had this like very unique side to them. So I think that's where I get it too, where I'm like, okay, yeah, I do believe in something above, but I'm also very conscious of nature and healing in a natural way. So... What is your spooky story, Nani?
Okay, so my spooky story, it was probably about the same age as far as my first real experience. So I'm going to preface it by saying, I don't know, I mean, I guess it could count as paranormal in a sense. When I was even younger than my first actual experience, I was actually just telling someone this story. I had a nightmare when I was about 3. And... we lived in this house where it was a split-level home. For people who don't know what that is, it's when you open the front door, there's immediately stairs that go up to, like, short stairs that go up to a first level and go down to a lower level, but the first level is the one that goes up. And so it's the first level, but it's a little higher than your typical first floor of a normal house would be. So we lived in this split-level home, and in my nightmare, I woke up, and my room was on the first floor. I woke up, and my house was on fire, and my parents like kind of barged in my room because they were like, we have to jump out your window to escape because it's the closest we can get to the ground. And in the dream, now for those of you who don't know, I have 2 younger brothers. One is 1.5 years younger than me, the other one is about 5 years younger than me. So it was just me and my closest in age brother at the time. There was no younger brother because I was only 3. But in the dream, my dad jumps out the window. My mom is holding my little brother's hand, but she also has another baby in her arms, which, again, he didn't exist yet, but I dreamt that he was there. And then there was, like, these little, like, gremlin-looking demon things chasing them out, like, through the door. And then when it was my turn, I remember I jumped out the window, but, like, I jumped out back first. I didn't jump out head first. So I jumped out with my back looking up at the window, and, like, this... like demon-looking face kind of like popped up, and I've remembered that dream ever since. Like I get goosebumps. So in this house, fast forward a couple years, I was about 5. My family on my father's side always had these huge Christmas parties, massive Christmas parties. When I tell you, you'd walk into the house, there was usually like a giant like 9-10 foot Christmas tree, and like presents spilling out all over because there's a lot of us. There's so many cousins, there's so many relatives, plus we invite friends and stuff like that from church and from this and from that, just from all walks of life. And this one woman, nobody knew who she was. was. Like, when we went back and tried to figure out where this object came from, she had gifted me, like, a teddy bear. And, again, when we went back to figure out who was that, whatever, nobody knew who we were talking about. So she was, like, some mystery woman that was at the Christmas party. So that night, me and my brother shared a room at the time in the same house that I had the dream in, but now the layout's a little different because now my little brother is there, my youngest little brother is there, so me and my other brother are sharing a room. And it was one bed, a toy chest, and then his bed. So that was how the layout of the room was. So that night after the party, I put the bear on top of the toy chest. And that night I had a nightmare about the bear, where it was like, it came to life and was large and was like Godzilla size and was attacking me and was like trying to chase me and run after me. And I was just like, but there was no details. It was literally just like I was in this black void and this giant bear was chasing me. And I woke up and I didn't tell anybody about it. And I remember we got up, got ready because we had to go to Sunday school and, you know, like Sunday morning church for people who aren't familiar. So we were getting ready and my dad was just like, I didn't even tell anybody about my dream. I told nobody, nobody knew until after the fact. My dad was like, I don't know what's wrong with this bear, but I don't want it in the house. Out of nowhere, my father says this. So he had some kind of something. Yeah. His own experience or whatever maybe. And he's like, I don't want it in this house. So on our way out to church, he took the bear and threw it in our trash can that was outside our trash bin. And mind you, I'm from Massachusetts. It's winter. It's snowy out. Like, there's snow all over the ground. And we come back from Sunday school. The bear is sitting on my couch. And the window is open. Oh my God. And I literally, like, goosebumps. Because we're like, we didn't leave the window open because it's winter, it's cold. Heating is expensive up there, especially because most houses back then were heated by oil. And if you're not familiar, oil is super expensive. You have to refill a tank, and that's what heats your home and your water.
That's crazy.
So it wasn't just like, you know, some random, and again, it's a split level house. You can't just climb up the first floor window. Yeah. That's not how it works. And it was just sitting there on the couch, and everybody was so sweet. It was after that I told them about my dream. Yeah. And I was like, something is seriously wrong. My dad literally made it a point to rip the bear into pieces and threw it in a dumpster, like, nowhere near our house. And yeah, that wasn't the first paranormal experience I remember having.
That is so crazy.
I know. And it started very young, clearly.
I know. That's a crazy part. Like, that's why we wanted to do this, because we have so many stories and it started from so young, and I think both of us are pretty open to experiencing stuff.
Yeah, and honestly, I think I'm a sensitive, not as sensitive as some people, but like paranormal stuff just seems to follow me places I go. I've never had an attachment or anything like that, but me and my brother, we've had lots of stuff happen to us, which obviously we're going to talk about. But even in this house, come to find out, it was built on top of some weird land. I don't know if it was like cemetery or burial ground or something like that my mom discovered way after the fact. And also my mom said that she had an experience in the same house, and this is the only thing I can remember aside from that, where at one point she was coming home late from work, or she was coming home from dropping my dad off at work or something to that effect. And she said there were these two black Dobermans that appeared out of nowhere and like kind of were like vicious at her, and were like, she's like, if I don't move, these dogs are going to attack me. And she literally just started praying on the spot, and she says that the dogs just seemed to disappear. And yeah, just like little things that surround this house that it's just so weird.
Did you ever ask your dad what creepy feeling he got from the bear? Did he have a nightmare too?
No, because him and my parents aren't together anymore, so yeah, so we don't really talk. But yeah, he must have had something happen, or a dream or a feeling or something like that, because again, I never said anything until after. Yeah. So for him to have that kind of react, I was like, okay, I feel a little validated.
For sure.
That, you know, this is happening. And it was just so freaking weird. And for you guys just to have an idea how creepy this house is. So there are these two like tall, thin, narrow, like shrub bush things that always grew out by the front door. We always kept them short, but it was on either side of the front door. And so at one point in this house, because we were renting, the water heater broke, and they tried to contact the landlord to, this needs to be fixed.
Yeah.
Like, we live in a cold area. We can't not have hot water.
Yeah.
And he had disappeared. Just nobody could get in touch with him. Nobody could find him. Nobody knew anything about his whereabouts. He completely disappeared. We were the last family to live in that house. And, like, me and my brother, because we know that this house is there's something up with this house, we years later talked about it to our friends, and they were like, we want to go see it.
Yeah.
Because my mom drove us there. It, like, drove us by just out of curiosity, and we were like, it looked abandoned, just completely, like, the shrubs that were by the front door, like, grew in front of it like this, like, completely blocking the front door. And so me, my brother, and a couple of our friends drove there late night because what else is there to do? Teenagers, you know what I mean? We drove there late one night, and they were like, oh, we want to, like, look inside and see if we can find an open door or whatever. So they went up to the back deck, and the deck door was open, but they didn't go in. They just kind of opened and, like, peeked in.
Yeah.
And they said it looked like somebody started renovating and just completely left everything mid-job. Like, tools, materials, everything was still in there, and you can tell it had been sitting there a while because they had, like, collected dust on it. Just completely left.
That is so creepy.
Yeah, that house. I mean, it has since been bought out by, like, a large corporation and got completely renovated, and, like, they built, they created a whole road next to it because it was at, like, a dead end to go up to, like, the senior assisted living thing where I'm like, okay, let's bring more depth to it.
Yes.
But, yeah, so that house something was up with that house. Something.
It definitely sounds like it.
Yeah. So that was my first early, from that dream to that teddy bear experience. It was creepy. I'm sure there's probably other things there that happened that I've probably repressed and just don't remember.
I'm sure. Yeah. Plus, you, as a little kid, sometimes, and we see these videos all the time where, like, kids go to their parents and they're like, I don't know, talking to something, and they're like, oh, it's just your imaginary friend. But guess what? Like, things start happening around the house, and then the kid doesn't feel validated, so he stops sharing.
Yeah.
Or as a little kid, you're like, you don't know what's going on because you're still figuring out yourself as a person.
And like I said, I'm pretty sure I'm a sensitive because I still have stuff happen to me till this day. So, more stories for future episodes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you did enjoy this, give us a little thumbs up.
Yes.
Put some little ghost emojis down below if you have any spooky stories or you have an early story like this, because this is pretty young.
Yeah.
I think so.
But I feel like when you're a kid is when you're more susceptible to it because your mind isn't so... it's not so jaded by society and, like, oh, that stuff doesn't exist, or that's drilled into our heads. But it's also, like, you're not bogged down by stresses of everyday life and work and bills and family and this and that. So you're so much more open.
Oh, absolutely.
To, to the paranormal and to other realms or to whatever you may believe in.
For sure.
But as a kid, I feel like you're going to have those experiences. People just tend to forget about them because they don't allow themselves to be open to it anymore because they're told it doesn't exist or it's just an imaginary friend or whatever the situation is,
Or it was a dream, it wasn't reality.
Yeah, you were sleepwalking. Exactly. So
for sure.
If you have any stories, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, don't forget to email us or leave us a voicemail.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.